Australia, a land of ancient stories whispered on the wind, a vast continent sculpted over millennia. Towering red monoliths stand sentinel in the heartland. Rugged mountain ranges rise to meet the sky. Crystal clear waters lap at pristine coastlines. This is a land where time seems to stand still. For over 65,000 years, Indigenous Australians have called this land home. They are the custodians of the oldest living cultures on Earth. Their stories, woven into the very fabric of the land, speak of creation and connection. Each rock formation, each waterhole holds deep spiritual significance. Theirs is a story of resilience and survival in one of the harshest environments on the planet. From the arid deserts to the lush rainforests, they adapted and thrived. They navigated by the stars, lived in harmony with nature, and developed complex social structures. Their connection to the land is profound. It is not simply a place to live, but a living entity. The land is their mother, their provider, their spiritual guide. This ancient bond has shaped their culture, their beliefs, and their very identity. Indigenous Australians lived in harmony with the land, not in dominion over it. They saw themselves as part of the natural world, not separate from it. They understood the delicate balance of nature, recognizing that every element had its place and purpose. Their practices were sustainable, ensuring the land's bounty for generations to come. They used resources wisely, never taking more than what was needed. Fire was a key tool in their land management practices. Controlled burns regenerated the land, promoting new growth and attracting game. This method prevented larger, uncontrolled wildfires and maintained the health of the ecosystem. They hunted and gathered only what they needed, respecting the natural order. Their methods ensured that animal populations remained stable and that plant species could thrive. Their knowledge of native plants was encyclopedic, passed down through generations. Bush tucker provided sustenance and medicine, with each plant having its own unique properties and uses. Their art is a testament to their deep connection to the land, reflecting their spiritual beliefs and cultural practices. Intricate rock paintings depict creation stories, ancestral beings, and the rhythms of daily life. These artworks are not just decorations, but are integral to their cultural identity. These ancient galleries offer a glimpse into a rich spiritual world where every symbol and figure has profound meaning. Their stories, passed down orally through generations, served as a living history, preserving the knowledge and wisdom of their ancestors. Elders were revered as keepers of knowledge, sharing their wisdom through song, dance, and storytelling. These traditions were vital in teaching the younger generations about their heritage. These traditions ensured cultural continuity and a deep understanding of their place in the world. They fostered a sense of community and belonging. The arrival of Europeans in the 17th century would forever alter the course of Indigenous history. It marked the beginning of significant changes and challenges. It was the beginning of a clash of cultures, a collision of worldviews. The Indigenous way of life was confronted with new and often conflicting ideas. The ancient harmony between people and land was about to be tested. The resilience and adaptability of Indigenous Australians would be crucial in navigating this new era. The vastness of the Pacific Ocean held no fear for European explorers. Driven by a thirst for discovery and the promise of new lands, they sailed into uncharted waters. For centuries, rumors of a great Southland had captivated imaginations. In the 17th century, they finally laid eyes on the Australian continent. Dutch navigators were among the first to chart the western and northern coastlines. They called it New Holland, a name that belied the ancient history already etched into the land. But it was the arrival of Captain James Cook in 1770 that would have the most profound consequences. Cook, commanding the HMS Endeavour, charted the eastern coast. He claimed the land for the British Crown, planting the seeds for a new chapter in Australian history. His reports of fertile land and potential riches sparked interest back in Britain. Little did the indigenous inhabitants know that this encounter would forever change their world. The arrival of Europeans marked the beginning of colonization, a process that would bring dispossession, disease, and cultural disruption. The ancient balance was about to be shattered. Section 4. Colonization. The First Fleet and Early Settlements. In 1788, 11 ships sailed into Botany Bay, carrying over 1,400 people. These ships, known as the First Fleet, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Australian history. This was the first fleet dispatched from Britain to establish a penal colony in New South Wales. The journey was long and arduous, taking over 8 months to complete. Australia was to become a dumping ground for convicts, a distant outpost of the British Empire. The convicts, many of whom were sentenced for minor crimes, faced an uncertain future in this new land. Life for the early colonists was harsh. They had to build their new lives from scratch with limited resources and support. The land was unfamiliar, the climate unforgiving. The settlers had to adapt quickly to survive in this harsh environment. Food was scarce and disease was rife. Many settlers fell ill, and the lack of medical supplies made their situation even more dire. Conflicts with the indigenous population were inevitable. The arrival of the settlers disrupted the lives of the indigenous people who had lived on the land for thousands of years. Two worlds collided, each vying for control of the land. The settlers' expansion often led to violent confrontations with the indigenous communities. Despite the challenges, settlements began to take root. The settlers built rudimentary shelters and started to cultivate the land. Sydney, established as the main penal colony, slowly grew. Over time, it transformed from a small settlement into a bustling town. Free settlers began to arrive, enticed by the promise of land and opportunity. They brought with them hopes of a better life and the skills needed to develop the colony further. The colony expanded, encroaching further upon indigenous territory. As the settlers pushed deeper into the land, the impact on the indigenous population became more profound. The impact on the indigenous population was devastating. They were forced off their ancestral lands, leading to a loss of their traditional way of life. They were dispossessed of their land, their traditional way of life disrupted. The cultural and social fabric of indigenous communities was irreparably damaged. Introduced diseases ravaged their communities. Smallpox, influenza, and other illnesses brought by the settlers decimated the indigenous population. Many were forced into missions and reserves, their cultures under threat. The policies of the colonial government aimed to assimilate indigenous people, often erasing their cultural identities. The scars of this period run deep and continue to shape the relationship between indigenous and non-indigenous Australians today. Efforts towards reconciliation and understanding are ongoing as the nation grapples with its complex history. Section 5: Gold Fever, Shaping a Nation's Destiny. The discovery of gold in New South Wales and Victoria in the 1850s transformed Australia. News of the gold rush spread like wildfire, sparking a mass influx of immigrants from all corners of the globe. People from China, Europe, America, and beyond flocked to the goldfields, all chasing the dream of striking it rich. Tent cities sprang up overnight, transforming the landscape. Melbourne, a small settlement just a few years earlier, exploded in size. The population boomed, and with it came a new sense of energy and ambition. The gold rush had a profound impact on Australian society. It created a more diverse and multicultural nation, breaking the dominance of British influence. It fueled economic growth, laying the foundations for future prosperity. But it also had its dark side. Competition for resources was fierce. Discrimination against Chinese miners was rampant. The environmental impact of mining was significant. The gold rush was a period of both progress and exploitation, shaping the nation's identity in complex and enduring ways. Section 6: From Colony to Commonwealth, a Nation Forged. As the 19th century drew to a close, a sense of national identity began to emerge. The scattered colonies, each with their own unique characteristics and challenges, started to see the value in coming together as one unified entity. This growing sense of unity was driven by shared experiences, common goals, and the realization that together they could achieve more than they ever could apart. The colonies, once isolated outposts, recognized the need for unity. They began to communicate more, trade more, and see themselves as part of a larger whole. This was a significant shift from the earlier days when each colony operated almost independently, with little regard for the others. On January 1st, 1901, after years of negotiation and debate, the Commonwealth of Australia was born. This momentous occasion was the result of tireless efforts by many visionaries who saw the potential of a united Australia. Celebrations erupted across the land, marking the dawn of a new era. This marked a significant step towards independence. The establishment of the Commonwealth meant that Australia now had the framework to govern itself, make its own laws and shape its own destiny. It was a bold step forward, but one that was necessary for the nation's growth. Australia had its own constitution, its own parliament, and a growing sense of self-determination. The constitution laid the foundation for a democratic government, ensuring that the voices of the people would be heard and respected. This was a crucial element in fostering a sense of national pride and identity, but the journey to full nationhood was far from complete. There were still many hurdles to overcome, both internally and externally. The young nation had to navigate its way through a complex web of political, social, and economic challenges. Ties to Britain remained strong, and the legacy of colonialism continued to cast a long shadow. While Australia was now a Commonwealth, it was still part of the British Empire, and many Australians still felt a deep connection to the motherland. This dual identity would shape the nation's development for years to come. The new nation faced many challenges. Social reforms were needed to address the inequalities and injustices that had built up over the years. Movements for workers' rights, women's suffrage, and Indigenous recognition began to gain momentum, pushing for a more just and equitable society. Infrastructure had to be built to support the growing population and economy. Railways, roads, and ports were developed to connect the vast and varied landscapes of the continent, facilitating trade and communication. And a national identity had to be forged from a diverse and sometimes fractious population. People from different backgrounds, cultures, and regions had to find common ground and work together to build a cohesive society. But there was also a sense of optimism, a belief that Australia could chart its own course in the world. This optimism was fueled by the nation's natural resources, its strategic location, and the resilience and ingenuity of its people. The 20th century would be a time of great change for Australia. The nation would face numerous trials and tribulations, but each challenge would also bring opportunities for growth and transformation. 2 world wars tested the nation's mettle, forging a strong sense of Anzac spirit. The bravery and sacrifice of Australian soldiers became a source of national pride, and the Anzac legacy would become a cornerstone of the Australian identity. Post-war immigration brought new waves of cultural diversity, enriching the social fabric. People from all over the world came to Australia, bringing with them their traditions, languages, and perspectives, which helped to shape a vibrant and dynamic society. Australia emerged as a modern, multicultural nation ready to take its place on the global stage. With a strong economy, a stable political system, and a rich cultural heritage, Australia continues to thrive and contribute to the global community.